Good afternoon. I am Elise Hampton. I am one of the commissioners on the Black History Commission of Arkansas, and I have the pleasure of introducing our final speaker. Janis F. Kearney is a nonfiction and fiction writer whose first book, a memoir, was Cottonfield of Dreams. Published in November 2004, Ms. Kearney describes that book as a love letter to her parents. Since then, Kearney has written extensively about hers and other Southerners' life journeys, including a second memoir, Something to Write Home About, chronicling her years as personal diarist to President William J. Clinton, Between a Rock and a Hard Place, a biographical nonfiction chronicling the life of Daisy Gatson Bates, Arkansas's civil rights legend, Conversations, William J. Clinton, From Hope to Harlem, an oral biography that included 90 interviews with Americans about the 42nd president's legacy and leadership, and Sundays with TJ, Memories of 100 Years on Varner Road, a book centered around stories her father shared with his 19 children throughout his 107 years. Ms. Kearney has also written 2 novels, part of her Cajun Lawman series. Her latest book, Only on Sundays, Mahalia Jackson's Long Journey, is another nonfiction which chronicles the life of America's gospel queen, Mahalia Jackson. Over the last 15 years, Ms. Kearney has also ghostwritten numerous books for other authors. Kearney's lifelong career has included roles as a public affairs director for state government, publisher of a weekly newspaper, director of communications for a federal agency, and personal diarist to a U.S. president. She has been an international public speaker and writing teacher since 2001. These days, her life is divided between her writing and publishing life under the auspices of WOW Publishing, the Celebrate Maya Project, a youth-centered nonprofit project founded shortly after the death of literary icon Maya Angelou, and the Read, Write, Share Writers Weekend, an annual literary-centered conference for published and emerging authors founded in 2015. Janis F. Kearney and Bob Nash have a blended family of 3 children, 5 grandchildren, 1 great-grandchild, and Finks, a German Shepherd. Her hobbies include reading, traveling, and spending time with close friends and family. At this time, I welcome to the podium Ms. Janis F. Kearney.
Good afternoon. Okay. Okay, can you guys hear me? Let me see. I don't have a slideshow, but books. I just want to do this one right here. And I'll just leave that up. My name is Janis F. Kearney. Thank you for that introduction. Thank you very much for that. I am so happy to be here. So grateful to Tatiana for inviting me. She has been an inspiration since I moved back to Arkansas. We've worked together before, and I'm so grateful for the work she's done for artists and writers and creatives, and I'm happy to be a part of that group. I brought a little script for myself, but I rarely follow the script, but I'm gonna try to do it. I am an Arkansas native. I am from Southeast Arkansas. Pine Bluff is home to many of my siblings. It's one of the places that I've talked about in my books because we're from a little place called Gould, Arkansas, and in this, thank you. And in the summers, after we had chopped cotton all summer, Pine Bluff was what we dreamed of going to and buying our school clothing and our school books and paper and all of that. So Pine Bluff was huge in our lives back in those days. It's always wonderful for me to be in the midst of other writers and creatives, and I have enjoyed immensely listening to the presentations on publishing magazines and art, and I really am. I've always wanted to be an artist, and I can't draw one lick, but I love art, absolutely. So thank you for all of those presentations. I enjoyed them so much. For the next, 30 minutes or so, I'm going to share a little bit about my writing life and offer writers or emerging writers a few tips that were passed on to me years ago. I wanted to start out by asking how many of you are writers in here? I see some of you are hesitating to put your hands up. Okay. Journaling is writing. Yeah, that's a form of writing. Because I'm going to talk about memoir writing today because that is the most important type of writing for me, even though I write other kinds of books. I also wanted to ask, are there other published authors in here? Okay. Dr. Hargrove, I know you are, definitely. Tanja, did you have your hand up? Okay. Okay, you're published. Scarlett? Okay, wonderful, wonderful. For those of you who admitted that you are writers, I know I don't have to talk about the joys and the challenges of writing with you. That writing looks easy from the outside. People who see us and say, oh, you wrote a book. How long did it take you? And when you say that it took longer than a year or so, people are always surprised. But writing is not an easy task. And it's not always just the mechanics of writing. It takes a toll on the insides of you as well, emotionally, if you're really writing about your family or about something that happened in your life that's painful. So writing is a gift, but also sometimes you feel like it's almost a curse. But I've been writing most of my life, started very, very early. My dad was my inspiration for writing, and the young lady mentioned that my dad died at 107 years old, and by that time, can you imagine the number of stories he had shared with us? That was his claim to fame, storytelling, and we, his children, were the beneficiaries of those stories, and I happened to be someone who loved listening to his stories and remembering them and committing to myself that this is something I want to do. I want to be a storyteller, but I wasn't an oral storyteller. I didn't think I could ever do that. I wanted to write the stories, and that's what I eventually got around to doing. But I want you all to know that you don't have to be a published author. You don't have to have anything that anyone can recognize to be a writer. All you have to do is embrace it and say, this is what is a part of me. Writing is a part of my life, part of what I do. So many of you in here who didn't hold your hands up may also be writers as well. So as I said, my writing journey started about 5 decades ago. down on a place called Varner Road. If anyone has read anything that I've written, any of my memoirs, you have read about Varner Road. Some people have called me and said that they had driven by and remembered some of the things that I wrote about Varner Road down 365. Why do I write? Writing is a part of me. It's just like breathing. It's just like eating. I wake up thinking about writing. I go to bed thinking about writing. It's probably as much a part of me as anything is. It's one of the few things that I would continue to do if I never, ever was paid for it, if no one ever read it, because it comes from inside and it's something that I actually feel like I have to do. That's how important it is to me. But on the other side, I can tell you I am grateful to be called an author, to have actually published books. And I am proud when I go into a library, I go into a bookstore, and I see a book with my name on it. That is a good feeling for an author, for a writer. So if that's something that's important to you all, keep writing, keep writing. I don't have a lot of minutes, but there's something I want to do. Janet, my friend Janet, who is a good friend, and Tanja know that I love interaction, so does Scarlett. So I'm going to ask you all, take 2 minutes, please, to write a very, very, very short memoir. And what is a memoir? Memories. It is writing down your memories. Find something, think really hard, and come up with something that you haven't shared with anybody. Write 1 paragraph, and I'm going to ask you to write that, and then if you're brave enough to share it with the rest of us. Can you guys do that? 2 minutes, 2 minutes. Anybody have a question about what I just asked you to do? Tatiana? If you have trouble doing it, just know that I write memoir and I know how hard it can be. So I understand. I feel your pain. Okay, Janet, I see you are not writing. No excuses. Okay, 1 more minute. Okay, I see that a couple of people may be finished, and since I don't have a lot of time, I am going, the rest of you can keep writing if you'd like. I am going to ask a couple of people who have finished their memoir to share it with the rest of us, if you dare. I'm looking at you. Uh-huh. Right here.
My mother was born in 1922. I miss her summers where we can. The big tin tubs filled with peaches, and we would take turns coming by, peeling peaches, eating them, and then getting up and walking away. That's something that she did every summer. And I wish I had written down her recipe for cha-cha. I would be in restaurants, those copies or the cha-cha would be in restaurants like Cracker Barrel or some soul food restaurant.
Thank you. Thank you. One more. Okay, great.
One cold day on a college campus, I found myself trying out for feature twirler and majorette. Many students came out to watch, as I was the only person of color who had ever tried out for such a position.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Is anyone else just dying to share theirs before we go on? Well, great. Thank you for sharing. And by the power invested in me, I now proclaim you certified writers. So thank you guys for indulging me. I always describe myself as a sharecropper's daughter who grew up on a small cotton farm in southeast Arkansas and fell in love with writing, listening to my father's stories as a very young child. I was an extreme introvert. When I was young, to think that I would ever get up in front of anyone, let alone some of you all, and speak would have been unheard of because I was so shy, so very shy. And I'm sure that had a lot to do with my choosing writing as a career and an outlet. No one during that time told me I could write before I decided that I could. No one encouraged me to pursue a career, even though my parents definitely encouraged us to read, but not to become an author. Not until something inside me told me that was what I was supposed to do. Unfortunately, I had no models, black, white, or other, to emulate in this arena. It was simply a passion that sprang up in me, and in time it became a mission, and it remains so today. I went away to college, got married, had a child, not in that order, and began a trajectory that included careers that I truly, truly loved. In 2001, I began my real life, my writing life, and in 2004, I became an author. My very first memoir was Cottonfield of Dreams, which was centered around my childhood and the people who were part of my life. I wrote the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that is the prerequisite for a good or a great writer. Telling the truth, sharing the truth. You may not want to write all of the truth, but what you write must be as close to the truth as you can make it. Your truth. Did you know that two people growing up in the same household have different truths? Have different memories? Did you know that twins, the closest two people that anyone could be, remember things completely differently? That is why I say, write your truth and let others take care of writing theirs. Why do I write? I write for 5 specific reasons. I write because I not only love my life and my past and my experiences, but I love the family that God endowed me with, the people I grew up with. the people who taught me and took care of me when I was younger. I also write because I love that each time I write a book, write a memoir, I find out something different about me. Another dimension of myself that either I'd never realized or had repressed for some reason. As someone who reveres history, and I do, I also write to honor my past, my ancestors, my parents, and the many people who were once part of the world I know today. I always take time whenever I'm traveling to remember a woman by the name of Ruby Jones, who was my fourth grade teacher. Besides my parents, she was the one who encouraged me to write and to read, and I'll never forget that. I remember the people who helped shape the world that I lived in down in Gould, Arkansas, and who helped shape me, the young Janis Kearney. One of my greatest joys and greatest impetuses for writing memoir is to share my world with others. Others who may dwell in a completely different place and whose life experiences have been completely different from mine. And I hope that my writing touches some of the readers, helps them think through their own lives and know what the possibilities are for them. I write because I'm in love with storytelling, thanks to my father, who was so brilliant at it. I often share about how in Arkansas, down in Gould, Arkansas, my father enjoyed a 100-year legacy of storytelling. He literally raised his children on the stories passed on to him and the true stories of his own amazing childhood experiences. More evenings than I can count, my siblings and I sat at my father's knee, mesmerized, soaking in his stories. Those evenings, those stories, were the foundation of the deep love for storytelling and writing. And I write as an homage to that greater being that I choose to call God, to show gratitude for being placed in this earth at this time, in this era, inside my village. I'm never reticent about saying God blessed me with one talent, not many like a lot of you all have. So my responsibility is to use, to share, and to hone that one gift to the highest level that I can. So, as you might have guessed, writing is my passion, and I'm convinced that it is the purpose for my being placed on earth. So, a few things that I want to leave with you today are the things that I learned just by living, and I've lived for a while, and writing throughout my life. A few nuggets of wisdom passed on from other writers well before I published my own book. As writers, we learn by immersing ourselves in the world. To what extent is up to each of us. But we have to have experienced life, love, pain, loss, to write credibly about it. We have to be interested in people outside our own circle to write about people who may not look like us, act like us, talk like us, or think like us. If I asked each of you here, what is your measurement of a good book? I'm going to say that most of you have the same ideas for a good book. You want a clear, concise writing style. You want an interesting subject. You want a great storyline and characters that are unforgettable. In a nutshell, you're looking for a well-written book that offers you a story and makes you want to keep turning the page. So let me ask a few of you to name at least one book that kept you reading through the night when you should have been asleep because you had to get up the next day. A book that stayed with you well after you read it, that you were excited about, so excited about that you read it twice, or that you passed on to your best friend. So, can any of you tell me if you've read a book like that?
For me, it's The Coldest Winter Ever by Sister Soldier.
Yes.
Definitely one of like those classics that I reread quite often.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Yes.
I'm a teacher, I don't need a mic. Warriors Don't Cry, Warriors Don't Cry by Melvin Sullivan.
Yes.
I stayed up all night reading that book, and I knew I had to be in my classroom the next day. And I went to work the next day with my eyes swollen because I had cried so much. And I always tell other teachers that you really can't quote sell a book to students unless you use the book yourself. And that book, I have not had a problem.
That's a great book.
And she's just, that story is just amazing.
It is. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else?
If you ask this question any day, it'd probably be a different book. But just what popped into my mind just now is Founder. One of the
Oh,
first books
wow.
I've ever read.
Mhm.
It's how it moved me.
Yes. Is that it?
As I was writing my little memoir thing on the bed, just about my 2 minutes, I remember being at my grandmother's house and she had all these books. And the book that I took out of her shelf was The Color Purple.
Oh,
And
wow.
I read that book. Yes, I was like, oh my goodness. Grandma want me to be reading this book. But it was on her shelf, so that was one of the books. And then I love the movie and I can recite just about anything.
Oh, my God. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. Oh, there's one more.
Since you like memoirs, Song in a Weary Throat by Pauli Murray.
Pauli Murray. Yeah.
I finished it a year after the day she died, and it was like I had lost a good friend.
She's a great writer. Thank you all for those. Thank you. So each of you gave your personal books, and they were a little different. All of the books were a little different. But the fact is they were well-written books, and they were books that gave you enough of the writer that you were attracted to it. You gravitated to it. And they also were memorable, and that's something I always say about a book, that it needs to be memorable. If you can't make a book memorable, you probably need to keep writing or start over. Those are stories that strike a deep, resonant, lasting chord with you. And some of you might even say that they were life-changing books, that they actually changed your life in some way. One writer, Natalie Goldberg, calls those books that stick to the bone. And each of those books are what I would call, they stick to your bone. Let me share a little bit about my experience from my own writing life. You will see, as I quickly learned, there's nothing such as rocket science about writing good books. Any of this will work for you as well as it worked for me. I talked a little bit about truth in writing. So here's what I believe. When we write, it is not enough to write an interesting story about our lives, but it is critical that we write with truth and honesty. Truth in writing is so important to telling our stories, creating a picture of our culture and the world as we know it. A skillful truth teller is worth its weight in gold. And what I tell new writers is, in the beginning, don't worry about being, making a big splash. What you want to do is just write it real and write it as it happened. Just make sure that you have the craft down. Be in touch with the world around you. I believe it is so important that we are in touch with the world around us if we are to be the purveyors of truth. What we have to be aware of around our world before we can write about it. We have to have an appreciation for the small things that take place inside our everyday lives, inside our boring homes, our predictable friendships, our relationships with our parents and siblings, even the cultures and relationships within our small communities, our churches, all the little episodes of our lives. When we write, those episodes begin to miraculously magnify, become larger and more significant. Virginia Woolf said that writers need a place of their own. And I never knew what that meant except when I really became a serious writer, because I learned that we really do need that stillness, that quietness that puts us in touch with ourselves, our truths, that place where that small voice inside of us, and we all have it. We may not listen to it, we may not hear it, we may ignore it, but there is that small voice, and we need a place where we can hear that small voice. Yet, while we need quiet and aloneness, we cannot be self-absorbed. We have to be interested in life and to some extent participate in it. When I tell people that I grew up as a sharecropper's daughter down in southeast Arkansas, spending my summers chopping cotton and falls picking cotton, growing up with 17 siblings out in the most rural part of Lincoln County, existing in a segregated environment of the 50s and 60s, when I talk about all that, most people see it as one-dimensional. They're only looking at the surface. They're looking at a child that grew up in a hard, impoverished childhood. My coming-of-age memoir, Cottonfield of Dreams, are centered around those years, but it is not one-dimensional. Not only did I write about the more surface themes of growing up poor, of trying to survive, the social ills of the pre-civil rights era of going to an all-white school, but I also wrote about the importance of family and my own relationship with a sister that most people took as my twin, and who we found out too late that not only did she suffer from mental illness, but that mental illness drove her to take her own life. I talked about how our family dealt with those two taboo subjects that most African American families find very hard to deal with. I talked about my dreams that began down in that cotton field for a different kind of life, even as I shared the things I loved most about the place I call Varner Road, about the unique sounds and smells and taste of Varner Road, of the people that grew up as part of my village. So writing is easy to some extent because you're writing memoir, because you're writing about yourself, you're writing about your own life, but it's very difficult at the same time because it takes courage to write about anything beyond the surface, the hard things that we've had to deal with. One reason I think is because very few of us believe there is anything about our lives that anyone would find interesting enough to read or that anyone would care about. And the second thing is what I've said. Writing our lives takes courage, and it takes confidence. You have to believe that you have a story worth telling, and you have to be courageous enough to share it. I will never forget some of the comments that are responses that I got after writing Cottonfield of Dreams. The people who did not know me that well learned me a lot more, and they were really surprised that I would share as much as I did about my life. But as I said, it's very, very, very hard to write a memoir without writing your truth. You may or may not write all your truth, but what you write has to be your truth. And your truth surprises you, first of all, that this has to be a part of your story, but it has to be a part of your story. Very quickly, I'll tell the story of how I finished my book, Cotton Field of Dreams, went to bed, and got up the next morning and had to add more to it because I had completely not included my sister Joanne. And that was such an important part of my story. I didn't want to, subconsciously, to tell that story of her mental illness and her death and our struggling with how to deal with that. So yes, writing your story, sharing your story, takes confidence that you believe there are people who would be interested, and it takes courage. It is not hard to bear your story with the world. So how many of you think you might be interested in writing a memoir? After all that's been said? One of these days, I think you will, because we need your stories. We need your stories. History matters. It absolutely matters. And our stories are part of history. So I'm going to, I think have I gone over my time yet? So I'm gonna try to end. I'm gonna give you a few tips if you're interested in writing your stories. Begin with one small moment, one moment in your life. Don't try to begin with everything. Begin writing with one moment. You will be surprised how that one moment would blossom out into pages and pages. I tell people, a lot of people have asked me over the years, how do you remember such small things that happened so long ago? It's because once you start writing, there's a connection between your mind, your heart, and your writing. Once you start writing, those memories just kind of blossom. Things you haven't thought about in years. Things you might have pressed down in your memory that you didn't want to remember, but they come back as you write. And that's a gift. That's a gift of writing. But pull one moment from your childhood, from your relationships, from a typical day in your life, and start writing. It really does open up your brain and your memories and stimulates your spirit. Writing memoir is not only rediscovering ourselves, but the world around us, our family. You can even see the difference in how you see your family, your friends, your neighbors, your teachers. Intellectually, we already knew all of this, but when we place our memories on paper, it's magical. It really is. It's just so surprising how we see them more holistically. Even more important to the story is our discovering our own voice, and each one of us have a unique voice. If we reread some of the things that we've written and we sound just like somebody else, you haven't discovered or you're not using your own voice. We all have a writing voice, and that's what you're trying to find. What we write should be truly our voice. How do we select the most meaningful scenes, the people who impacted our lives most? Those relationships you thought would last forever and never change, the conflicts in our personal lives and within our communities. How do we paint a believable picture of our lives for others to read and feel connected to? That is the key, and that's what we work so hard toward as writers. Very quickly, let me just say how important memory is. And this is something that I've done whole workshops on, but I'll just say memory is the most essential piece in good memoir writing. The richer our memories, the richer our memoirs will be. And what does that mean for some of us who are past 30, 40? Get to writing. Because our memories do get a little duller as we get older. And they're so important. They're so important to writing our stories. I'm trying to skip over things so I can give you some of what I've said. Give yourself permission to open those memory vaults. We all have them, things we've stored away that happened at a bad time in our life or an early time in our lives, and we've closed that vault and we haven't reopened it. If you're writing your life story, you're going to have to reopen it. Give yourself permission to do that. For inspection, for introspection, those vaults may be filled with old emotions, old hurts, anger, dashed dreams, failed relationships, childhood trauma, loss, and so much more. But we need those memories to write good memoir. So I think really I have probably gone over my time, and I'm just going to end by saying that we all have it in us to become writers, to be writers. And if you're serious about writing your stories, you can do that as well. It takes a little bit more work. It's still taking me work to become the writer I want to be. You never get there. You just keep doing the best that you can. Memoir writing should be full of joy and feeling of accomplishment. And you should do that. You should find yourself a writing group if you're interested in writing. Go to writing workshops. There's lots of them online now. There's lots of opportunities for good writing, and there is so much need for good stories. Let me end by saying, miracles aren't accidents, and nothing in God's world happens by accident. I'm happy to say that I am indeed a living, breathing miracle, and writing is my saving grace. The passion that has driven me for as long as I can remember. And I truly hope some of you have that kind of burning passion about writing or something in your life. And I hope you'll hold on to it and know that its true value is when you share that gift, whatever that gift is, with others. So I thank you. I thank you for listening to me, and I pray God's graces on each and every one of you. Thank you.
When you write a memoir, how do you approach telling the fullness of your story that may be attached to the embarrassment of somebody else?
That's a really good question. I try very hard to not write. I write with the thought of not causing harm. But the truth sometimes is attached to negative experiences. In those periods, and I've written about things that have happened to me, I use different names, and I also kind of write in, let the readers know that I'm using a different name for some of the characters in my book. But I do write the experience. I include the experience because I think other people, our readers, learn from our experiences, the hard ones as well as the good ones. So I try not to use people's personal names when I write. if it's a negative experience.
Any more questions?
Do you have a certain place that you go to write or a certain time of the day? And do you have like so many words or so many pages that you give yourself?
I have had several places, but my husband encroaches on my space, so I keep moving. But yeah, I have to be alone. I have 2 different places in my home that I usually write, but I also go away to write. When I'm at a certain place in a book, I'll go away and spend some time kind of coming up with my final draft. And that's when I know I need complete, quietness and aloneness. Morning time is my time to write. The earlier, the better. I don't have a certain number of pages. Sometimes I might write 1 or 2 pages. Sometimes I might write a lot more than that. But I don't restrict myself to the number of pages. The closer I get to finishing a book, I'm going to spend a lot more time on it. So I'm going to write a lot more pages as that time comes closer. Thank you.
Writer's block. How do you realize you have it, and what do you do to get away from it or break the writer's block?
I think I know I have it when I sit at my computer and nothing comes. I can't think of anything to put there, or anything I put there makes no sense. So I'll usually just stop and move away and do something else. It may be an hour, maybe a day, but when I come back, by the time I come back, I'm usually ready to write.
I have one question. In my artwork, I always say that I can create images from visually thick words. And as you were talking, I mean, I could see your father sitting there with all the kids. Does that work in reverse for writers? Can you see a photograph and see the words come?
I definitely can. I'm a visual writer. I mean, I can see everything as I'm writing it. And I can hear conversations as I'm writing it. So yes, that works for me. And, I'm sure you've heard that once you get to a certain point in writing a book, the book kind of starts writing itself because it kind of knows where it's going. So there is something magical that happens once you really get into writing a book. I'm sorry that I was going to show these. These are 2 of my memoirs. This one is Cotton Field of Dreams, and this one is my book, Something to Write Home About, and that was the one about the years in the White House.
So, my grandmother is going to be 98 in a couple. And it's always been my dream to write her story, because my great-grandfather came here in the 1900s after he was free from slavery. And they did sharecropping in Conway, in Morrilton, up in that area. And so we have a book that we sit on her table, and they ask different questions. And we just want to put that together. So what we start once we finish filling that whole book up? Because we ask the question, and she just ravels on all the stories and stuff like that.
Wow. Somebody's going to have to be the transcriber. Is that going to be you?
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
I don't know, where do we go after that? Once that book is filled and the different stories, the questions they ask her, and she's told.
Yeah, well, somebody's going to have to go through that whole book and create narratives, not questions and answers, but narratives. And from there, you will want to make it into a story, her story. And you'll probably, if you're a writer, if you're not a writer, you might have someone help you make trans.
Janis Kearney?
You might have someone transform those narratives into story form.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll give it.
But that is a great, that's great that you're having her do that. That's wonderful.
There's so many stories, I mean, just to listen to a story, it's like, oh my goodness.
Wow.
You did that when you were young?
I'm so glad you're doing that. And one of the things I always tell people with older parents, older, aunts, whatever, please start asking them about their lives, interviewing them, taping them. Please don't let them leave here with their stories. So please do that. I'm so glad you're doing that, Tatiana. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.